Yo ho ho, so today I'm going to be doing an unhaul. So I know I said in my last unhaul that that was going to be the last unhaul. I literally titled it the last unhaul because I genuinely believed it would be. But as usual, I flip-flopped and I've been reorganizing my bookcase at the moment. I'm organizing everything into genre and I realized I still have books that I'm holding on to for no specific reason. I like to think that my books say something about me, that they kind of represent who I am as a person. And I noticed that I still had books that I was like, I'm not too keen on having that in my collection. So I didn't really mean to tell a lie in my last video, but hopefully you'll understand and you'll enjoy this unhaul. So the first book that I'll be getting rid of is Wasted by Moria Hornbacher. This is a memoir on her experience with an eating disorder, specifically bulimia. So I wanted to read more about eating disorders because it's not something that I'm super familiar with. I wanted to know a bit more about the mindset behind it and what goes through your head when you're someone who's struggling with an eating disorder. And this gave me a lot of insight. Like, I'd say if you're someone who's interested in reading about eating disorders, it is a pretty good book to pick up and to learn from. It did put me off eating Doritos for a really long time though, so that's a warning to you. So the next book is A Room of One's Own by Virginia Woolf. So when I got this and before I started reading it, I was very excited because I was like, wow, this is really going to bump up my Goodreads challenge. It's so short, I'm going to fly through it. Wrong. This is quite a difficult book to read, at least it was for me. It's written in stream of consciousness, which I never usually have a problem with reading, but I couldn't really connect to it. I couldn't really get into it. I just had an issue with it and I'm not even sure why. And when I finished it, I was like, I feel like I missed everything in this book. Not that I was skimming it or anything, but I just feel like a lot of the things that she brought up really went over my head. And I decided, I was like, yeah, I'll reread it in 10 years. And it hasn't been 10 years yet, but I really don't want to reread it. I don't want to reread it. I think I'd much prefer some of her fiction, and I'm going to read some of her fiction writings, but I don't really want to reread this again. Next is The Body Snatchers by Jack Feeney. I was so excited to read this when I got it because I love sci-fi, I love horror, and the combination of the two, I was just really looking forward to it. And I found this incredibly disappointing. Also, it was incredibly confusing to me because I'm still completely unaware if the fact that they were actually taking over people's bodies or if they were just growing new people. It seemed like they were doing both. I mean, maybe it explained it in the novel and I just overlooked it, but it was just not great. Super easy read though, like very quick read and stuff like that, but not particularly memorable, and I just went into it expecting so much more than what I actually got out of it. The next book is Persepolis by Marjane Satrapi. This is a graphic memoir on her experience in the Iran-Iraq War and the fact that her family had to flee in order for their own safety. I got this because I was interested in the story. My dad is Iranian and he never ever talked about the Iran-Iraq War, even though he was there. So I wanted to learn a bit more about what it was actually like being there. And it is horrifying. It is horrifying that there's one section where she comes home and finds that her neighbour's house has been completely bombed out, but somehow her house is still standing. It's also quite funny in places. There's a lot of like teenage girl shenanigans and things like that. It's definitely worth a read, especially if you're someone who likes the medium of graphic novels, but I don't think I'm going to be rereading it again, and I don't see the point in holding on to it when it can just go to someone else who would enjoy reading it. Then I have Asylum by Patrick McGrath. I loved this at the time when I read it. I did a review on it, I was really into it, and I still enjoy the story of what it's about, but I don't really have much interest in holding on to it because I know I'm not going to reread it. And at the end of the day, it's just kind of filling up my shelves. It's about a woman who falls in love with a psycho, basically, and she kind of self-sabotages her own life in order to try and make it work with him. It's told through the perspective of her psychiatrist, who's also a family friend, and it's interesting, but you feel like there's a lot of the story that you're actually missing out on because you're going by through secondhand information, but it is interesting enough, and I do recommend it if you're someone who's into sort of twisted love stories. Then I have Bitch in Praise of Difficult Women by Elizabeth Wurtzel. I absolutely loved this essay collection when I read it. I put it off for years because it's a big enough book and the font is really, really tiny. But when I did actually get to reading it, I really enjoyed it. I really wanted to do a review on it at the time, but when I actually wrote out everything for the review, I realized I was just doing a synopsis on each essay and just saying how it just blew me away, and it wasn't really useful to anyone. This really blew my mind at the time when I read it. It gave me a lot of food for thought, and I really appreciate the fact that I read it, but I know that I'm not going to ever reread it. And again, I think it can go out to like another woman who could use it and have her mind blown just like mine was. So the next book is the Kurt Cobain journals. So for the last 4 years, it's just been living in a box under my bed, and I think that's completely absurd that it's just taking up space here when it could be out and making someone else happy, or answering questions that someone may have about Kurt Cobain who's genuinely interested in him. This is the most popular review that I ever did on my channel, and I still get comments to this day from Kurt Cobain fanboys telling me how I'm going to hell for reading it, how I'm a horrible person for invading his privacy and promoting that other people read this, how Courtney Love's a bitch for ever publishing it. You know, it just goes on because, you know, these guys genuinely feel like they have a connection to Kurt Cobain and know him personally. And it's just quite hilarious, to be honest. I don't really see the point in holding on to this when it's just sitting in a box under my bed. So I'm going to move on to books that I haven't read, and I'm not doing this to like get my TBR down or anything. These are books that I bought that I can't even really remember buying, and I bought them because I had a notion that I was going to really enjoy them, obviously, or because I was inspired by somebody else, or I had like a memory about something that inspired me to buy a book, and it never happened. Like, I'm never genuinely going to read these books, and they are just taking up space. So the first book is Ecstasy by Irvine Welsh. I bought this because 14-year-old me wanted to read it, because 14-year-old me was hardcore into My Chemical Romance, and this is the book that gave them the title of their band name, because this is Ecstasy, A Tale of Chemical Romance. That is not a good enough reason to read a book, in my opinion. Now, I did enjoy Trainspotting, and I do want to read other Irvine Welsh books, but I flipped through this and I don't see myself reading it. I don't really see myself enjoying it, and it's been sitting on my shelf for about 4 years now, and usually that doesn't happen. I usually don't have books unread for that amount of time, so I think it goes to show that I'm not interested in reading it. And I have Oryx and Crake by Margaret Atwood. So I bought this in a secondhand bookshop because I loved the cover. I was specifically trying to track down Oryx and Crake in this cover because for the last book in the trilogy, they decided to reprint all the books with a really fucking ugly cover. And I was just like, no, I want to read that one day. I don't want to buy these ugly books that just like look like generic bestsellers that you take on holiday. They just look disgusting, in my opinion. So I thought these covers were way more cool, but I read about 60 pages of this and I couldn't get into it. I do plan on going back to it, but my idea is the fact that I can't complete the books in this edition because the last one never came out in these editions. So I think that would really, really bother me. Like, I have calmed down a lot about like my fussiness about books. Like, I don't mind if books get a bit damaged. I don't mind anymore if I break a spine, because before I used to keep my books in pristine condition. But I am still quite fussy about having books in the same editions, and having mixed editions just wouldn't fly by me. It really would bother me. But I picked up these two books on sale, I think in Chapters sometime last year, something like that. Didn't read the synopsis of them, literally just saw that they were by Joyce Carol Oates, and I was like, I'm going to get them. So they're two books in the Wonderland Quartet. So it's The Garden of Earthly Delights and Expensive People. And upon reflection and trying to read both of them, I couldn't get into it, and I feel like I made a massive mistake. The thing is that I got very overexcited in the bookshop because I saw that they were on sale. I saw that they were an author that I was interested in. I saw that they were what are these called? The Modern Library Classics. I don't have any Modern Library Classics. I've always really liked the look of the books and the spines and everything like that. I was like, oh yeah, I'd be a real reader then. I'm not going to read them. I've tried to read both of them and I couldn't really get into them. The stories don't really seem like my cup of tea. I've learned my lesson not to be blind buying things. The next books you'll recognise from my old background. It's the History of Astrology and Prediction and a book on tarot card reading, neither of which I've read. I just bought them because they were like printed in the 70s and 80s. I thought the covers looked cool. I thought they kind of represented my then aesthetic of what I was trying to go for. but I bought them knowing that I'd probably never read them, and I never have, and I don't see the point in holding on to them, especially since they are now what I would consider clutter. I'm sure these books would be useful to someone, and I have a friend in mind who might be interested in taking these off my hand, but if not, they're just going to go to either the secondhand bookshop or a charity shop. That has been my Unhaul, so I think I'm officially done. The only thing that I'm still questioning is whether to keep my graphic novels on Harley Quinn, because I have gone off her significantly since I was a teenager, and I don't know if I really want to keep those comics. But aside from that, I feel like my bookshelf's looking quite good, and I will show you a little tour of what I've done now. So this is what the top of my bookshelf currently looks like. If you remember, this used to be my old background, and I had a lot of stuff on there because I thought it would be pleasing to the eye, and now I've moved that downstairs. For the most part, there's some stuff that I've gotten rid of. Then if we move down, I've got my Blu-ray shelf, which is also going to be moved downstairs. Basically the main TV is down there, the Blu-ray player is down there. It makes more sense to have them down there, and this is going to become my sci-fi / dystopian bookshelf. I'm organising everything into genres at the moment. This is my fantasy shelf. I don't really read that much fantasy, but I think I'm going to be trying to do more so in the future, which I'm excited about. If we go down, we have sort of miscellaneous stuff. I moved most of my Penguin Classic Deluxe editions together. It looks a bit chunky, but I don't really mind. Then I've got some non-fiction that I need to pull from there and put on the non-fiction shelf, and then the rest of them are just kind of some of my favourite novels. I don't really know how to categorise them really. And then over here it's just more of the same. More like sci-fi stuff, more non-fiction, more favourite books. This is going to be my contemporary shelf one day when I get more contemporary books. And then if we just move down to the bottom, this is going to be my non-fiction shelf. I have a good bit of non-fiction there, and the other ones I'm just going to have to move and sort into another area. And then there's just my horror shelf, which has the rest of my Penguin Classics Deluxe. I don't really want to separate them. This shelf used to be so full, so I'm really happy with the amount of space that I've been able to make. So overall, I'm a lot happier with how my shelves look now. I feel they look a lot neater, a lot cleaner, and it just makes my mind feel a bit more at ease. I also have 2.5 shelves worth of space now that I'm going to be moving the movies downstairs, so I'm dead pleased with that. So that has been my Unhaul. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I will talk to you soon. Goodbye.